limited to 2 years. The wages were 3 times as high as at home. The state-owned Soviet mining company looked after its miners in the foreign capitalist country. We were young at the time, and working on Spitsbergen was an honour, remembers Alexander Naumkin, who worked in Pyramida in the 70s and 80s. In the abandoned rooms, Ellen Andreasen is particularly fascinated by the homemade decorations on the walls and cupboards. Silent witnesses of the active exchange with the Norwegians following perestroika. Vodka and fur for nylon stockings and Western cigarettes. Some rooms have hardly changed since the Norwegians were last here in 2006.
When I step into this room, I'm struck by how tidy the people left it all. It was respectful. There was a warehouse with wallpaper, furniture, and lamps. All the basic equipment was uniform. All the other things were individual. They could furnish their homes the way they liked. That explains the wealth we see here. It doesn't make me think of poverty at all. I see the need to create something very personal and private here. In this society where people were never alone when they were working or eating, this was the only room where they were alone. It was a very precious room for its inhabitants.
Every room an alternative design to the Soviet collective. The attempt to create a home so far away from home with whatever means possible. And these rooms are also expression of how bankrupt the idea of a better communist society, free from money and greed, was by the end.
It was a company town. You were supplied with food and drink and the other things you needed to live. There was no use for money. The wages were paid straight into the workers' bank accounts in Russia and the Ukraine. But the people still had valuables, such as jewelry or money they'd saved, even though they weren't officially supposed to have it here. There was no way of complaining if you lost these things. Who would you have complained to? I think that many people had such valuables that they weren't officially allowed to have. That's why they had to look after them well and use secret compartments like this one.
The state-owned mining company found fewer and fewer people who wanted to work under such conditions far from home. They couldn't even be won over with good wages. Russia's economic crisis after the fall of the Soviet Union got to Spitsbergen too. The last remaining residents were brought back home in 1998. The huge apartment blocks were abandoned. The cold of the Arctic has penetrated deep into the walls. Even now in summer, when the sun warms the polar air to a good 10 degrees, it remains cold and damp inside. And yet, new life is flourishing in some of the rooms. The stone housing blocks were built quickly in the late 80s. Maybe too quickly. They can't cope with Spitsbergen's climate. Entire walls are completely damp. Lichen is decomposing the remnants of the Soviet utopia in the Arctic. Only in the past few years has the state-owned mining company done anything about the constant decay. Even seasonal workers from Central Asia have been hired. After 1998, Moscow didn't care about its northernmost outpost in Europe. But now that the international race for the huge oil and gas deposits in the Arctic is beginning, Spitsbergen and the former mining settlement are becoming strategically interesting once more. At the moment, the attempts to get them back into shape seem a bit half-hearted.
At the time, the people got a certain ultimatum by when they had to leave the settlement. I think they got 2 months, but they all left pretty quickly. I think it should all have been maintained right from the start. It's difficult to revive the abandoned settlement.
The Danish musicians managed that for a short moment.
So it's unique. So get your camera, come closer and take a photo like me and my friend Lenny in the Mosnofen. You are welcome. This house was our hospital with a lot of rooms.
1, 2, 3.
Nice. Very nice. So, think of a word, whatever word you feel like about this place, Pyramiden, and whisper it. And just keep whispering the same word, and Mads will go among you. And again, it's important if you try not to move in your fancy, expensive clothes. Okay? Action.
I think we'll only be able to process this place properly at home. As long as we're here, it's difficult to really understand this place.
Så der er også bare de lyde, som vi fanger.
We recorded lots of great sounds here. But it will only be when we get home that we'll notice sounds that we didn't notice here.
Så kan nogle af de lyde, som man måske ikke lige lagde mærke til.
We're going to be in for 1 or 2 surprises. Other sounds we thought we could make an entire song out of could end up being thrown away. We're excited.
Ja, det får vi se.
It has to settle. Our impressions will occupy us a lot over the next little while.
Pyramida is disturbing and inspiring, and not just for the musicians. This imposing settlement doesn't seem to fit into this barren landscape, even less so now that it no longer has a purpose. Since the late 80s, there's even been a swimming pool in Pyramida. It's incredible because even just supplying the settlement on Spitsbergen with drinking water was a challenge. A pool like this was certainly not standard in the Soviet Union in towns of just 1,000 inhabitants. Hein Bjerg has swum here before. That was in 1998. He was one of the last visitors. For the musicians, the performance in a swimming pool is a world premiere.
All of this is incredibly exciting research material, and we'll be able to use it for many years. I think these facilities in the Arctic were like a shop window, a demonstration of power. When these buildings were constructed in the 80s, the Cold War was still going on. I think you have to live with the principle of a beautiful death here and let everything decay at its own speed, without human intervention.
The archaeologist and the photographer want to revisit this place one day. What will have become of this modern ruin then? The cold climate on Spitsbergen is preventing it from decaying with any speed. Pyramida, the witness to the former Soviet world in the middle of the Norwegian Arctic, could be here like this for hundreds of years to come.